Hi, book friends. It's Kim, the lifelong reader. Welcome back. It's time to do a reading update for this week. I still have a few books in process. Cider House Rules by John Irving, How to Read a Book by Adler and Van Doren. These two didn't get a lot of reading time this week because I've been prioritizing other titles, so I'll talk to you about those now. My first finish of the week was Ladder of Years by Anne Tyler. And I talked about this one a little bit last week. This follows a woman named Delia who is married and in her very early 40s. She has 3 children. I think the youngest of those children is 15 at the beginning of this novel, and it's a young boy. And Delia is feeling like her kids don't need her anymore. Her son, her 15-year-old, has decided that he definitely doesn't want to be clingy, doesn't need her anymore. And she's been married to the same man for over 20 years, and she's been living in the same house her entire life. She married a doctor who took over her father's practice. Her father lived in the house with them until he died recently. So she's dealing with a lot of different things in her life. And she's feeling like her family doesn't need her, doesn't want her, doesn't really pay a lot of attention to her. So they go on vacation together. And during that vacation, it's a summer vacation to the beach, she decides impromptu that she is going to pick up her beach bag and start walking that way. And she leaves her family and hitches a ride to a neighboring small town and basically starts to settle in and develop a life for herself. And I was really enjoying this reading experience. It was fun for me to imagine someone just uprooting their entire life and finding a little room for rent, making friends, getting a job, really starting to feel like she's standing on her own 2 feet. As the story goes on, her job morphs, it changes. Her first job is not her last job in this new place. She begins to develop relationships and gets friends. And in her second job, she meets a man and a young boy, his son, who are in a similar position to how she left her own family. He and his wife are split up, and he hires her in a sort of a caregiving role, housekeeping type role. And it's that role where she starts to get close to another family. The boy is a little bit younger than her kids. He's 12, so he still needs a mom. And he does have a bit of a missing link to his own mother because his mom is younger. She is a news reporter. She's very focused on her image and her career and not so much on being a mom or a wife. So there are some strange parallels to these two women's lives. And I really did enjoy the reading experience, but I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I was disappointed in the end. People got hurt in the beginning when she left, and people were also hurt in the end. And that would be acceptable to me as a reader if it seemed like the protagonist, Delia, gained anything from all of that. But it really doesn't feel, the end was very subtle, so it didn't feel to me like a whole lot had changed. And I did backtrack a few pages and kind of read over it again to see if I could figure out where her mind switched, what changed for her, what helped her make her decision. And again, if it's there, it's subtle, but it sort of felt like an, oh, well, and just a quick decision. And to me, there were people that were involved, and it really sort of, I don't know, put a dull light on what otherwise was a fairly decent story that I was enjoying. Now, it could be that I'm not a mother and that I wasn't a wife for 20 years. So maybe I just can't relate to what this person is feeling. But the end of this was a letdown for me. So I'm looking at the 4 or 5 other books I have by Anne Tyler on the shelf, and they're definitely not priorities based upon how this book left me feeling. The second book that I started and finished during this week was on my Kindle, and that was Mr. Dickens and His Carol, and that's by Samantha Silva, and that was her debut in 2017. And this follows Charles Dickens over the weeks in December and late November, where he was approached to write a Christmas story, and it follows him throughout the writing of that story. Now, this is a completely fictionalized tale, but I thought it would be fun to read. I try to read a couple Christmassy books during December, and I thought this would be kind of fun because it's Christmas Carol adjacent. So it's not quite like reading the Christmas Carol again, but similar to that. So this is a fictionalized version of his life. Of course, all of the main players are there, as far as his wife and his children and the people that were around him work-wise, and his family, his brother Fred and his father John are involved somewhat in this story. But it is Silva's depiction of what those weeks might have looked like. And I was expecting to have a little bit more of the writing process of the Christmas Carol, and it was less about the writing. I mean, we do see him writing, but we are very detached from the writing process. What Silva did in this tale was she really kind of made things that happen in the Christmas Carol, she made them happen around Dickens. So she made his daughter say something about dead as a doornail. And he met someone in the street named Jacob Marley, and he created a name for a miserly Scrooge type person, and it happened to be Ebenezer Scrooge. And he has a friend that gives him some bushy eyebrows and a bald head and a big white beard, and he becomes the character of Ebenezer Scrooge because he's trying to hide from people. He's tired of being Charles Dickens. He wants to be someone else, so people stop coming to him for money or to ask him different questions. That's a big theme in this book. Dickens was feeling a lot of pressure from his family and some of his friends. It seemed that he was responsible for getting them out of debt when he was a younger child, a young boy. A large part of his family went to debtor's prison, and Dickens got a job at the age of 10 and worked and got his family out of debtor's prison, which it's always interesting to go back and read a book that reminds you of how the world used to be. While we do have a lot of things that, are weighing down on us as a society, we do not have debtor's prison. And if we do, and it's somewhere and I don't know about it, please let me know. But I don't think that's something that we're dealing with. I know credit card bills can sometimes feel like debtor's prison, but it's really not debtor's prison. So it's good to read about times when they had things like that, even though it's terribly sad to think about someone going or someone working very hard at those young ages to get their family out of debtor's prison. So in this book, we also have the creation of a character named Eleanor Lovejoy. And Eleanor is a theater actress that befriends Dickens. And Dickens in this tale has a bit of a falling out with his wife. And his children go away on a vacation and leave him on his own. And during that time is when he strikes up a friendship with Eleanor. And Eleanor helps him with crafting this novel somewhat through some of the experiences that she brings Dickens through. And she becomes somewhat Dickens' muse. And to be frank, that is a part of the story that I didn't really care for very much. Now, I'm not a Dickens expert. I've read a few of his novels, and I do think I like Charles Dickens. But as Dickens was portrayed in this novel, he was emotionally unfaithful to his spouse. He was talking to Eleanor like she was his muse, and he was enamored with her physically. He found her beautiful. He wanted to spend more time with her. And his wife and children were away, frankly, because he had had lunch with a former muse. And she found out about it. So those parts of the novel, I know life is not perfect, but those parts of the novel really turned me off. And I really, for a Christmas themed book, wasn't really engaging with someone who was finding his muse in someone who wasn't his spouse. Now, does that resolve itself? Yes. Do they do anything or touch each other? No. And, in a way, Dickens fills a very important place for Eleanor as well, because there's some personal backstory with her life and her current life where Dickens played an important role in her relationship. And overall, I really did enjoy the book. For the first few chapters, it was slow going, but I was really hoping there would be a payoff. There was a payoff. I would say the first third drug a little. The second third was really, really entertaining, and half of the last third was really, really good as well. I really liked the way the novel wrapped up and closed out. I got my nice closure at the end of the book, so I felt better when I left the book. But the part where he's slightly unfaithful to his wife did not sit really well with me, especially in a Christmas story. So if you're not bothered by things like that and you're looking for something lighthearted to read for Christmas, this was a little bit over 300 pages, I believe, somewhere in that range. And it wasn't a super long read. And I did find it on Kindle Unlimited, so it was free for me to read. So I do still have one more that is going that I have to talk about. And this one, The Secret History of Jane Eyre. I started talking about this one last week. This is by John Pfordresher. I am enjoying this. It is getting more interesting. I was hoping to have it finished before I talk to you about it. I am on page 154 of roughly 220 pages. And I am enjoying this. I've not read a lot of literary criticism, and that is what this book is labeled as. And I've never, of course, read a lot of information about the background of the Brontes. I do have several books on my shelf, and I say several, it's probably a total of 3, including this one, that talk about like the Brontes' mother and who she was, and then the Bronte sisters. And then, of course, this one claims to know the secret history of the writing of Jane Eyre. And so far, the secret history is basically how did she come to develop her thoughts and feelings about men, and how did she come to craft a character like Rochester? And that's the part that is really exciting for me. It's interesting. I'm learning about a lot more about the writing that she did with Branwell. Now, I've watched a movie before about the history of the Bronte family, and the movie really focused on all 3 girls, Anne, Emily, and Charlotte, writing and spending a lot of time with Branwell. But this book paints Charlotte and Branwell as really, really close. He was less than a year younger than her, almost just right about a year, and they were very close. And Branwell is a passionate boy. He becomes a passionate, troubled man. And there are parts of this book that don't sit well with me. Again, in this one, like, Pfordresher is starting to tell us that Charlotte starts to form Rochester from the way she sees her own father, and that he is a passionate man and he has a robust sex drive, and he's building that thought mainly off of the fact that the Brontes had roughly a child every year until the spouse passed away. And I want to say it was 6 children altogether. I don't necessarily think that points to a robust sex drive. I feel like back in those days, without any birth control, you were going to have at least a baby a year. I mean, to me, that seems pretty rational. And also thinking that if I were a writer and I were writing a young man that I was interested in, I'm trying to put myself in Charlotte's place. I don't think I would pull any type of inspiration from who my father is. And maybe I'm just completely removed from what Charlotte's life was like, and I'm not understanding. I didn't have a brother, I had a sister. So again, maybe it's the difference, and maybe Pfordresher is looking at that a different way. But if I were writing, I would be looking at the men that I had known in my life. And by the time she writes about Rochester, she has known a few men. And of course, he does also go from father to Branwell, brother, Father Patrick, brother Branwell. And then we go to the spouse of the woman who taught the school in Brussels that she attended, that Charlotte is known to have had feelings for and exchanged letters with. Now, that is much more believable. And that sat much better with me to think that that would be where she would craft a romantic, partner for herself in a novel. So I am enjoying it. Parts of it, it's a lot of, what do you do in these types of books? You read everything you can get your hands on and you form an opinion. And I'm enjoying him laying out his opinions. Some of them I maybe won't agree with, and some of them I probably will. So I'm excited to get this finished this week and give you a final update on that book, so you can see if you might be interested in reading it yourself. And one other housekeeping thing, I do want to say that on a previous video, I had talked about Claire Keegan's book, novella really, called Foster, and how much I really loved that novella, but I was really wishing that it was much longer than it really was, and it would be fleshed out in a broader way because it was such a beautiful story. And a couple different people had recommended to me on here to watch the movie called The Quiet Girl. It was created off of Claire Keegan's short story, Foster. And I just want to say thank you to those people who recommended that, because I was able to watch that and I cried like a baby. It was so beautiful. And the way that movie ends, it just crushes me. And it's aligned with the book, but it visualizing it, seeing it was really a moving experience. So I don't think it's a movie I can watch again. It's a bit soul crushing, but it was absolutely moving and beautiful. So just thank you guys for recommending books and movies. It's really brought a whole other layer of enjoyment to my life, which sounds so silly to say, but it really has. So, and I hope that things that I'll say and do on this channel will bring the same to you. So that brings me to saying goodbye to you guys. I am about to embark on a few days of vacation. I'm living in Florida and it is finally cool to where I can go outside and do some things. So I am anticipating that cleaning up around my house, doing some yard work, doing some touch-up paint and things on my home are probably going to interrupt some of my reading time. So I will come and talk to you again next week, but I don't know that I'll have nearly as much to talk about unless I find some good audiobooks, and then I can do some audio while I'm doing some work outside. So I hope you're enjoying your Christmas preparations, and I hope to hear from you in the comment section. And until I see you again, happy reading.